Good morning. My name is Sohail Merchant. I'm the Associate Director of IT over here at Kilpatrick, Townsend. I wanted you to give you a little bit of background as far as the two legacy firms that were merged back on January 1st, 2011, which was our day one together. So at that point, what happened was we had Kilpatrick Stockton and then Townsend and Crew, and we merged together. And when we merged, and I think some of the challenges that we faced are, in some cases, like day-to-day challenges that we all face with integration of systems. But with a merger, what happened was there was a big sense of urgency. Giving you some high-level dates, in October, late October, is when the merger was announced in 2010, and really our day one was supposed to be January 1st, 2011. So we had about 60 days to do whatever integration we needed to do to make this thing work. And since we had 60 days, we said, okay, what is, as a combined firm, what is our goal for day one, and what should be like, and I think about things as top five. So what should be our top five? So the way we identified it, the first thing is really the networks and the phones. So the networks, we need to be able to access each other's networks, and we need to be able to call each other up using extensions. The second thing was our emails. So we need to be able to communicate via email so that you open up a global address list and you see all the people there, whether they're legacy Kilpatrick or legacy Townsend. The third thing was our DMS, that we need to be able to access each other's DMS. Fourth was billing. So if we have clients, really, how would we bill if a legacy Kilpatrick attorney wants to bill to a client that is on the legacy Townsend side? How would that billing take place? And then obviously the fifth was our client-facing systems, like our internet, need to be combined together. So this particular presentation addresses two of those issues, or two of the top fives. One is dealing with the email, and then the second is dealing with the financial billing. And what we did was really, we had, as a firm, we had the different legacy firms own different components of this, but really the technology that we used was really the integration builder to do those two things. Just a little bit of background as far as the size. Combined firm, it's a 700-lawyer firm. We're part of AMLA 100. Total employees are about 1,500. We have 18 offices worldwide. Like I said, the merger date was January 1st, 2011, and these are the two legacy firm names, Kilpatrick Stockton and Townsend and Crew. Just to also give you a sense of, some of the things that were happening, there was a lot of employee turnover at that time. Since we had 60 days to execute it, we had other issues to deal with. There was our offices were headquartered one was on East Coast, the Atlanta, basically, and then obviously the Townsend and Crew was on the West Coast. So there was a time difference as well, 3-hour time difference. There were a lot of other issues dealing with it, which made things very difficult as far as executing things. Talking about some of the back-end systems, Kilpatrick Stockton had Elite as their time and billing system, so did Townsend and Crew, which made things a little easier. Obviously, we use AD and Exchange like other firms do. iManage was our document management system. The time entry system. So Townsend was actually using DTE. We were on Carpe Diem. Since there was only 60 days, we could not impact the desktop. So the desktop remained the same. We needed to make sure that when we did the time entry, whether it's using Carpe Diem for legacy Kilpatrick or the DTE using Townsend, everything would flow in to Elite. And since Elite, we had major differences in the way things were implemented and so on. For our day one, we really did not combine our Elite instances together. That was scheduled to be like day 1 plus 90, which is really March timeframe is when we combined the Elite systems together. So what I'll basically describe is how we use Intapp to still work in the mode where people can charge time across different firms and make it to the right elite instance. As far as the Intapp components, the Kilpatrick, Stockton had Time Builder, and then Townsend and Crew had Integration Builder and Wall Builder. This presentation is specifically around Integration Builder. So the one thing that we do want to share also is that since a lot of the development got done on the Kilpatrick Stockton side, we did not have any experience with Integration Builder. So I'll talk about some of the things that we had to deal with as far as training and support that we asked Intapp to do for us, which really helped out with this merger. The first challenge that we had, like I described, was the email, and we wanted to make sure that when somebody opened up their global address list and there was an attorney A that was part of Kilpatrick and an attorney B that is part of Townsend, both should appear in the global address list. Now, since the exchange was not combined, how can we do that? So the one thing that we did during this merger is we made sure that there was a common HR system. And in the HR system, we identified the domain names for the IDs. So if the attorney A is there and the attorney B is there, whatever their IDs are, we also included what the domain is. And that's from the back end, that's what we use to figure out, where the user base is. And based on that, what exchange is their home exchange. And then, we use Intapp really to create that global address list for us. Now, one thing, and let's see if I can talk about this specifically. What we did was, in order for us to do that, we had obviously the AD objects. So in this case, if attorney A is part of Kilpatrick Stockton, their AD object is in the Kilpatrick exchange. But what we did was for that attorney A, we created a contact record on the TTC exchange in this case. And likewise, for attorney B, who's part of TTC, we created a contact record on the Kilpatrick exchange. So what that did was when you opened up the global address list, it combined the objects and the contact records that were there together to give the perception to a user at Kilpatrick Townsend on day one that everybody is together and everybody can be addressed using the global address list. Now, the way this thing worked on the back end was obviously very complicated. We created this whole logic based on Intapp and then based on the HR system. And there was a lot of SQL stuff that was already put in place also as far as the logic to say, okay, how do we create a contact record and where do we create a contact record? And since we had information on the domain name for, in this case, attorney A and attorney B, we knew that, hey, attorney A, we had to create a contact record in the TTC exchange, and attorney B, we had to create a contact record in the Kilpatrick exchange. In addition to that, at that point, we also had about 1,500 or so distribution lists, at least on the Kilpatrick side. These distribution lists would be like, all attorneys in Atlanta, all attorneys in San Francisco, all associates, and so on. Now, before the merger, we dealt with all of these distribution lists very manually. So when we had a person join the firm, we would figure out, or the service desk would figure out, what distribution list they should be part of. And believe me, when I sat down with people at the service desk that actually maintained that manually, just to try to figure out how they maintain it, there is no way they can maintain those things easily. I mean, you imagine 1,500 distribution lists and trying to put new people coming into the right distribution list. And then if people are moving, like if an associate becomes a partner, how do you change that one person from like the 50 distribution lists that they're part of to another 25 or 30 that they should be part of and remove them from the other ones? I mean, it was very error prone. So part of the whole logic behind this was making sure that we create a distribution list that could be easily maintained using Intapp. We figured out in this case what that hierarchy should be, and in this case, made it so that the Intapp would be able to maintain all of that stuff for us. So really, just to give you a few more pieces of detail, we created a distribution list based on a hierarchy as far as if you are a partner, that partner distribution list is made up of, say, for example, partners in Atlanta, partners in San Francisco, partners in Walnut Creek, and so on. And then each one of those is getting maintained in an automatic manner from our HR system. So from our HR system, it would say, these are the partners in Atlanta, and we would use basically Intapp to feed all of that stuff into those distribution lists in an automatic manner. That distribution list right now is running on autopilot. Literally, people get updated into our HR system, and within 4 hours, the distribution list, the 1,500 or so distribution list, is maintained automatically. And it automatically figures out how people should be added and deleted from different distribution lists. So based on if an attorney, for example, is moving from an associate to a partner, it drops it from all of the associate distribution lists, adds it to the partner distribution list. If an attorney suddenly is working in multiple offices, that attorney automatically gets added to the appropriate distribution list. We also extended that even further by creating some manual distribution list in this case, like, for example, things like executive committee and minorities and other things that cannot be determined specifically from, your information in the HR system. But what we did was we created like a drop down of all of the special groups that a person can be part of. So in this case, we have like Bill Doris, who's our part of our executive committee. HR basically flags them that this Bill Doris is part of executive committee and he's part of diversity council. And based on that, those special groups are used as well to create specific distribution list. So this AD record is what I was talking about before, where you have your day one experience where you have the cross-firm communication, which using Intapp to create the appropriate contact records on both sides and get that automatically maintained is done automatically. And then this is the part where I was describing all of the human resources stuff where HR is updating all of the information. Based on that, we have SQL code that feeds the appropriate distribution list, and that's the one that's getting maintained automatically. The distribution list really, in this case, since we had separate Active Directory servers, the 1,500 or so distribution list would be basically sent on both sides, the Kilpatrick and the Townsend. And again, the way it would work is it would work the same way. So if you opened up like the # partners, you would have the same list on the Kilpatrick that you would have on the Townsend side. The only thing would be if you expanded on the partners list, the objects would be a little different. Like in this case, if partner A is residing here, you would have partner A being part of that partners list, and it's an AD object. But that same partner A is part of as a contact record and is part of the partners list on the Townsend Active Directory server. And then these distribution lists, we basically kept on expanding. Even after past day one, we kept expanding on these distribution lists. And it actually grew from like 1,500 to 2,500 because we added specifically other levels and things like that as well. So in this case, things that were not done before, like in this case, we had distribution lists for different departments, but we added specific ones for different teams as well. So team distribution lists were added. Other types of distribution lists, the way I was describing about the special groups, were added. And they were all maintained, and that's the number right now, about close to 2,500 distribution lists and about 33,000 memberships based on that. And it is pretty much real time, like I said, about 4-hour turnaround time. We could run that more frequently, but I don't think there's a need to run that more frequently because within 4 hours of somebody updating a record in HR, in this case, the distribution list get maintained automatically. And, that removed, quite honestly, and this is not just specifically for mergers, but if you imagine if you have distribution lists at your firm and how they're maintained right now, And even though you might not be going through a merger, if you are trying to maintain it or automate this, I think Intapp is a great tool to use to do that because it has integration with AD. So somebody who knows literally nothing about AD could actually create some of these things and have it feed AD and create the appropriate distribution list. Because just to give you an idea, I mean, my DBA, who is very savvy in SQL but knows nothing about AD and AD objects and stuff, he was the principal developer on this, and he was the one who actually created all of these distribution lists. Now, granted that he worked with a consultant from Intapp who came to help us, and I'll give you a little bit more detail down the line on one of my future slides as far as how that transpired. But the consultant literally came to us with a couple of weeks. He spent a couple of weeks with us, but most of the development was done by a DBA to create all of these distribution lists and contact records. And like I said, this DBA had no knowledge of AD and how to create objects in AD. The second challenge that we had was regarding time entry. And like I described before, day one experience, we were not planning on doing anything on the desktops. And since we had, on the Kilpatrick side, we had Carpe Diem for the time entry system. We had, on the Townsend side, DTE as the time entry system. And they were, at that point, feeding into separate instances of Elite. We had to figure out some way so that if a Kilpatrick attorney wanted to charge time against a Townsend matter, how would they do that? And vice versa, how would a Townsend attorney charge time against a Kilpatrick matter? And we wanted to make sure that the time entry, as far as from the user perspective, is the same, so that if they're charging time, it doesn't matter which Elite instance it is. We would have more work on the back end to take care of all of that stuff, but it would still work transparently to a user going in. And this is a process that needed to be there only for the 90 days before we merged the Elite instances. Now, if you can imagine, I mean, merging the Elite instance, we even thought about, okay, how can we have combined Elite instance on day one? And that was just not possible. At that time, I remember us taking a look at the Elite instance, and just our Elite instance at Kilpatrick was feeding about 60 different downstream applications, having all kinds of impacts. So we thought, okay, there's no way we can combine Elite. So we have to do something like this, where for the first 90 days, we kind of set up a process where it's transparent to the attorney's charging time, but we might deal with more things on the back end. And then after the 90 days, we could just pull the plug on this synchronization process that we set up and then have a combined Elite instance. So really what we did was, we knew that not all matters would be used for collaboration. So we said, okay, let's set up a client number on the Kilpatrick side and another client number on the Townsend side. And these would be used for like what we call collaboration matters where people from our other legacy firm is collaborating. So if there was a Townsend matter that a Kilpatrick attorney needed to charge time against, we would create a matter on the Kilpatrick side under a specific client number, so that there would be one client number for the merged clients on the Kilpatrick and a merged client on the Townsend. So we would create the matter under that client number, and then whenever somebody would charge time against that matter, there would be a UDF that would actually be used to map that matter into that Townsend matter. So I know it's kind of complicated. Maybe I should repeat this one more time. A client number, and let's say it's client number A here, and another client number B here. So we created two separate client numbers on the two sides, and then whatever the collaborated matters were, we would stick it under each one, under the client A or the client B there. And if there's a matter X under that client A that's stuck, that matter X maybe maps to a matter Y on the Townsend side. So there was a UDF that says, hey, this X is really Y on the Townsend side. So that's the way we would have an attorney charge time using that matter X. And then that on the back end, Intapp is used to actually create a load file on the other side, and it would charge time against the Townsend matter. So beyond the merger, really, I think there are other plans. We've been using Intapp more and more. There's continuous enhancements to the distribution list. So some of the other enhancements we did was, we wanted, say for example, we have people in marketing that are dedicated to different departments. So what we did was, since these are marketing people and they're dedicated to, say, the IP department, they wanted to be part of the IP distribution list. Likewise, there might be other people that might need to be excluded. So what we did was we actually created like a inclusion list and an exclusion list, so that you can add anybody and you can say, I want this person to be included in this list. And this list could be, say for example, Townsend partners, but then it takes care of everything that's fed from that, like the Townsend partners Atlanta, Townsend partners San Francisco, and so on. So whatever the downstream distribution list is based on that tree hierarchy that we created, you could add it or exclude somebody on that, and then it would take care of all the other distribution lists. So you don't have to include them in all the 2,500. You would include them wherever you wanted to, and then whatever fell under that in that hierarchy, it would automatically get taken care of. So we did some enhancements to that. We continuously look at other things that we can use Intapp for. Legacy Kilpatrick never owned Integration Builder. We had a lot of batch feeds that we did SQL feeds, but we looked at all the stuff as far as the SQL feeds and try to figure out how can we automate those things in more real time, and where did it make sense to use Intapp to actually do those instead of doing a nightly feed. We also used it for like workspace creation, so that workspaces get created in a much more timely manner when a matter gets opened in this case. And these are, workspaces inside of iManage. This is one of the slides where I wanted to actually talk about the partnership we had with Intapp. Since Legacy Kilpatrick did not own the Intapp appliance at the time of the merger, we did not have any experience with it. Like I said, we had one of the DBAs who was the principal person who actually did the development of the distribution list. And then, the other developer or the other DBA from the Legacy Townsend side who actually did the development of the financial system upload files. But the distribution list part is where we actually needed more help on. So we actually called on Intapp and we said, we really need somebody to come and sit down with us who's your subject matter expert in Intapp. Literally, I think we talked on a Wednesday or a Thursday. That person was on a flight that weekend, and they were with us for the next 2 weeks. And that consultant and the DBA and then the other DBA on the Townsend side, they were actually basically locked in a web conference throughout those whole 2 weeks, trying to figure out what are the different challenges, how can we come about using Intapp to overcome those challenges. There was a lot of knowledge gap, like our DBA on the Kilpatrick side, mentioned before, had no knowledge of Active Directory and Exchange and how to create some of those things. So there was a lot of help there. I've worked with other companies before, and really I think the one thing I value with having Intapp here was that, we had a short time frame. A lot of times when you're dealing with companies and, you just don't get the sense of partnership there, because the sense of urgency that you might have, they might not have, where sometimes it's frustrating, but Intapp was just, it was a pleasure to deal with. We formed a partnership. These guys understood our urgency. They were willing to help us out. In some cases, our licensing was not even done because we did not have licenses to use it firm-wide, and they said, fine, we'll deal with it when we have to deal with it. Let's just get you guys started on the actual development so that does not hold you back. A lot of things. If you can imagine some of the Active Directory things, we actually had to create literally a bubble to test all of those things on. So it was a major deal. We could not impact people in separate domains by creating all of these contact records. So we actually had to create a virtual environment to actually do all of the testing for all the distribution lists and the contact record and made sure that it worked on day one. They helped us with a lot of that stuff as well. And it's just, like I said, we continuously enhance those two applications. We are looking to use it more and more. And, I think once you overcome that first challenge as far as how to use it, some of the connectors that you get out of the box with it, like in this case, if you know how to feed, for example, AD, and if you wanted to feed, say, for example, interaction or some other system, it doesn't matter. It would work. the interface is the same, so it doesn't matter which applications you're trying to feed to. It does not add that complexity in the integration builder. That's just something that's all modular, and it knows the connectors and knows how to feed those things. So you always have people like a DBA say, well, why do we need an integration builder? Well, you need it because you don't need to worry about what the database schema is of all of these different applications. You create it once, and then you can reuse it at a few different places, and it's kind of transparent to you as a user as far as which system you need to feed to. And then, some of the issues that we had, we also, during those 2 or 3 weeks of development, we actually pulled in other people as well as far as their technical support from Intapp, and they were very helpful. And, these people, again, partnered with us to make sure that they understood what the urgency level was, and they worked with us to make sure that we meet those strict timelines. Some of the stuff that is there that, if you are going through a merger in this case, make sure that obviously you test these things, because whenever you create stuff like this, it's not something obviously you want to test on day one of your merger. Some things are more challenging than others. If you're testing system integration and stuff, yeah, if you have a test environment, that's fine. But if you're testing things like that are impacting your AD, you can't just go about creating another domain that is named the same, obviously. It becomes a bit more challenging. So you need to make sure you do the right testing in this case. And then really, I think part of the other challenge is that when you think about this, and I kind of use this example over and over again, even dealing with other people as well, that if you take an example like a distribution list and the maintenance of that, it's challenging if it's a distribution list that's made up of 500 distribution lists and 1,000 people. Now, if you go from that 500 distribution list to 2,500, that is not a linear scaling where it's not like it's going to your effort is like 5 times as much. Your effort is much more than that, because it becomes really complicated how you maintain all of that stuff, and the amount of errors keep going up as well. So really, I think part of it is that in these challenging times when we have limited resources, how do we look at things and how can we say, what, instead of working harder, how can we work smarter? And I think this is a perfect example of how we can automate things and really work smarter given the limited resources we have. And always look for efficiencies so that we can get rid of some of those manual tasks.